بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات البحث وأكرمني بنور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن عيونك برحمتك يا أرحم. Before Salat, we mentioned definitions given by the late Father Al-Bab of the agent, which is Qadir Mukhtar, which is powerful and willing, in contrast to the agent which is Mujab, which is forced. The next term that we should define is Alam. You remember we talked about Alam being Muhdath. So what is Alam? Al-Alam kullu mawjudin siwa Allah ta'ala. Universe, or anything other than Allah. The whole world of contingent beings, the whole world of mumkinat is alam. So here we mean by alam anything that exists other than wajibul wujud. Wal alamu kullu mawjudin siwa Allah ta'ala. Any being other than God the Almighty. The other term is muhdath. Muhdath means created. Okay? But what mutakallimin mean by muhdath is something which didn't exist and then came into existence. In other words, something whose existence is preceded by non-existence. Or something which is preceded by another thing. Maybe there is no non-existence, it's another thing. For example, if you have something which is moving, this motion is preceded by sukun, by being stopped somewhere. So this is also muhdath. Or for example, if you have a water which is liquid but used to be gas, this is also muhdath. So either it is preceded by non-existence or it is preceded by something else. So this doesn't exist, but maybe something else existed. So either totally nothing existed or something existed other than this. Anyway, this was not always there. So muhdath is something which has a history of change. It was not always like this. So al-muhdathu huwa alladhi wujuduhu masbuqun bil-ghayr, is the one whose existence is preceded by another thing, or bil-adam is preceded by non-existence. Wal-qadimu bi-khilafi. Qadim or eternal is something which is different, it's opposite to it. So it means that it was always like this. There is no precedence of Adam or precedence of another thing. Qadim. Again, we are talking about Kalam. In philosophy, Hudus can be Hudus al-Zati as well as Hudus al-Zamani. But Mutakallimin normally have Hudus al-Zamani only. So we don't want to talk about philosophy now. So هو الذي وجوده مسبوق بالغير. So Hadith is the one which is preceded by another thing or by non-existence. وَالْقَدِيمُ بِخِلَافِهِ. Qadim is opposite to that. Qadim means eternal. Jism, another other thing to define is jism. What is jism? Jism is the object which occupies a space, has 3 dimensions, and you can divide it. Yes? Any jism, any physical mass can be divided because it has dimensions. Even if it becomes very small so that you don't have any instrument to divide it, in your mind still you can divide it and say right of it, left of it, top of it. So there is no end for its division. So jism can be divided more and more. Al-jismu. What is jism? هو المتحيز. Mutahayyiz means something which occupies space. Okay? Something that you can point at it.
Can you say matter? Can you say matter?
Matter, but matter in the sense of physical mass, because matter in philosophy again is different. Matter in philosophy can be jism, can be other things. Physical object, physical mass. Al-mutahayyiz, something which occupies a space, something that you can point at it. الذي يقبل القسمة, accepts, admits division, you can divide it, it's divisible. And في الجهات الثلاث, in 3 dimensions. So in height, in width, in depths, you can divide. What is hayyiz? We said al-mutahayyiz, something which occupies a space. So what is a space? What is hayyiz or makan? What is hayyiz or makan? Pardon? It's a kind of a space that we imagine. In reality, we don't have anything as makan, as location, other than existent objects. So we have different things. But we imagine that there is a space as if it is empty, and these things go and occupy it. But in reality, we don't have a space separate from these things. So he says, Al-hayyizu wal-makan shay'un wahid. We mean by a space or location the same thing here. وَهُوَ الْفَرَاغُ الْمُتَوَحَّمِ, the gap which we imagine, it's mutawahham, it's imagined by us, so it's a kind of imaginary gap. الَّذِي يَشْغَلُهُ الْأَجْسَامِ, the physical objects settle, dwell in it, occupy it. بِالْحُصُولِ فِي, by being there. In reality, we don't have anything like makan. Thank you very much. We don't have anything like makan separate. There is no gap, because scholars say that real vacuum doesn't exist, because real vacuum is nothing. This is our imagination. We think that there is empty space, and then things go and settle in it. But empty space doesn't exist. It's just something that we create by our mind in order to understand better. Okay? So, al-hayyizu wal-makan shay'un wahid, space, location here are meant in the same way, and that is the gap which is imagined, which is occupied by physical objects by existing in it. Haraka, another concept to define. Still we have not started the argument. We are just defining the concepts. Al-haraka, motion. What is motion? Huwa حصول الجسم في مكان، حصول الجسم في مكان، حصول الجسم في مكان. 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 بعد مكان آخر. Please remember this because we have a phrase later which is very difficult to understand. We need you to remember this. There is a paragraph coming tonight. This is a warning. There is a paragraph coming which is very difficult. Most difficult paragraph from the beginning of the book. Remember this definition. الحركة هو حصول الجسم في مكان بعد مكان آخر. What is حركة? Motion is something like A exists in a second place after it used to be in another place. This is حركة. For example, you move from this room to another room. So when you are in the second room, you have done حركة. Means you used to be in another place, now you are in a second place. حصول الجسم في مكان بعد مكان آخر. You are in a place after being in another place before it. Is it clear?
Yes.
What's حصول?
Being. والسكون. What is سكون? Sukun is being in the same place for the second time. Yeah? We have two people. One has moved from this room to the other room. We say he has done haraka. He has moved. The other one is still in the same place. We say he has sukun. No motion. He's idle. So sukun is what? Being in the same place but in the second time. Is it clear?
Same place the second time.
Yes. السكون هو حصول ثان في مكان واحد. Second, being in the same place. Second time, for example, being in the same place. This is sukun.
Is this after the thing has moved? Is that what you're saying?
This has not moved. Something else has moved.
Time.
Motion is, whenever you have motion, it means that it had a situation before and a new situation. This is the meaning of motion, because motion means gradual change. Yes? You remember we said change is either motion or it is kono fasad, being and corruption, in the sense that philosophers say. Haraka is always tadriji, is gradual. So, haraka is always in need of a beginning and an end, or at least a second stage. Maybe it's going on, so has not ended, but at least there is a second phase. You need mabda and you need muntaha. You need a departure point and you need a destination. Maybe this destination by itself is a departure point for another station. No problem, a station after a station. So, haraka is always understood when you compare the initial condition with the second condition and you see that something was in the initial condition, now has moved to the second station. This is haraka. What is sukun? Sukun is that we look at the same thing two times and we find it in the same place.
So we look it, but it doesn't move. It's just.
It has not moved. This is sukun.
I came after 101 and still saw people here. So second time they were.
Like a student who doesn't do any progress. You see him day after day, week after week, still in the same situation. But a good student, every day is a new situation, making progress. Okay? Progress is very important. So, al-harakatu, I repeat the translation because we need this for that paragraph. Al-harakatu, motion. Hiya husul al-jism, being of the physical mass, في مكان, in a space, in a location, بعد مكان آخر, after being in another place, another location. Okay? You need always two places. والسكون. What is سكون? هو حصول ثان في مكان واحد. Being for the second time in the first place, the same place that you were before. This is سكون. Okay? إذا تقرر هذا. If all this has been now established and made clear, okay? Has it settled all these definitions? If they have settled, now we can start the argument. فَنَقُولُ. Now we can mention the argument. Of course, we already explained the argument based on Allama Hilli's text. فَنَقُولُ كُلَّمَا كَانَ الْعَالَمُ مُحْدَثًا. This is the core of argument. Alam is muhdath. Therefore, the creator of Alam is not mujab. Alam is muhdath, means has history of Adam, history of non-existence. Alam was not like this before. Okay? So, the creator of Alam is not mujab. Because if Alam was created by a mujab agent, then it should have not been changing. Either you have to say the creator is himself muhdath, or you have to say that he is not mujab. There is no way to think that the creator is qadim and the creation is muhdath and he is not mujab. Because if creator is qadim, the creation is hadith, he cannot be mujab. It means that he was there, this alam was not there. Then alam came into existence, so he's not mujab. Because we said mujab and his action cannot be separated. Whenever mujab is there, action is there. Whenever sun is there, it's shining. Whenever fire is there, it's burning. Okay? So, either you have to say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not qadim, or you have to say this alam is not muhdath, or you have to accept that he is not mujab. You cannot say he is not qadim, you cannot say the alam is not muhdath, so you have to say Allah is not mujab. He is qadir mukhtar. Is it clear? Now we explain this. كلما كان العالم محدثا كان المؤثر فيه وهو الله تعالى قادرا مختارا. This is the core of argument. If alam is muhdath, the originator, the mu'athir, the cause, the one that brings this alam into existence, has to be qadir mukhtar, has to be powerful and willing. So we have two sub-claims here. فَهُنَا دَعْوَيَانِ. There are two claims here. We have to establish these two. أَنَّ الْعَالَمَ مُحْدَثٌ. We have to prove that alam is muhdath, is created. And second is to prove that if alam is muhdath, the creator has to be mukhtar. أَنَّهُ يَلْزَمُهُ يَلْزَمُ حُدُوثَ الْعَالَمِ اختيار الصانع. That صانع has to be mukhtar. Now let's explain why alam is muhdath. Then we move to the second claim. أما بيان الدعوة الأولى. Da'wa means claim. Explanation of the first claim. What was the first claim? Alam is muhdath. فلأن المراد بالعالم عند المتكلمين هو السماوات والأرض وما فيهما وما بينهما. متكلمين, they mean by alam, skies, the earth, whatever is in them and between them. Okay? فيهما means in skies and in the earth. بينهما means between the sky and the earth. Yeah, there are things that are inside earth and inside the sky. There are things that which are between them. Okay. All these things, إما أجسام أو أعراض, either they are physical objects or they are accidents, أعراض. You know, in logic you study this, and also in philosophy, you know, Johar and Aras, substance and accident. Here it says Ajsam and A'rad, because Jism is one of the types of Johar. The Johar has 5 types, one is Jism. Anyway, either it is just like plaster, or A'raz, like white. White is a quality for plaster, or softness, hardness. These are A'raz. It can be calm, chafe, or you know, there are different, you know, 9 types of aras. Yes.
Can you explain aras?
Accidents. Aras are the properties, the conditions which are not part of the substance. They belong to the substance. إذا وجد في موضوع. In philosophy we say aras is mahiyatun. إذا وجدت في موضوع. Whenever exists, it belongs to a subject. You cannot have color without subject. Color of what? Can you imagine color without a subject? Some people say, yes, I went to shop and purchase, you know, paint to color. But that is not color. That is again a substance. It's not color. But color without substance does not exist. You know, do you understand? That paint is not color. So, or softness. Softness is a kayf, is a quality for something. Cannot exist without a substance. So anything in this alam is either substance or araz, which is accident. Here it says jes or araz, no problem. وَكِلَاهُمَا حَادِثًا. Both jes and araz are hadith. What does hadith mean? Created. In which sense? It means that they are preceded by non-existence or by another thing. Yes? مسبوق بالغير or بالعدم. Why? Why أجسام and أعراض are all hadith? أما الأجسام, physical objects are hadith because either they are in the station of haraka or sukun. They are not free from haraka and sukun. And haraka and sukun, both of them are properties of the things which are hadith. Haraka is a sign of being hadith. Sukun is also a sign of being hadith. أما الأجسام فلأنها لا تخلو من الحركة والسكون الحادثين. Ajsam are hadith because Ajsam are not free from haraka and sukun, which by themselves are hadith. When something is not free from a quality which is hadith, that thing also must be hadith. Because Ghadim cannot have created qualities. Okay? Ammal ajsam means ammal ajsam are hadith because ajsam, physical objects, are not free from haraka and sukun. They are not without one of the two. And these two are hadithain. Haraka and sukun are hadith. وَكُلُّ مَا لَا يَخْلُو مِنَ الْحَوَادِثِ فَهُوَ حَادِث. Anything that is not free from changes, he is himself also created. This is the reason why we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not have change, does not have harakah, because if Allah had change and harakah, he becomes hadith.
Good, thank you very much.
Why ajsam are not free from harakah and sukoon? If you say, I need more explanation, why jism is always coming with harakah and sukoon? Amma annahu, yani anna al-jism, annahu. In the previous line was saying annaha. Why it was saying annaha and now it says annahu? Annaha because what's ajsam. Now is annahu means annal jism. Jism is mufrad muzakkar. Ajsam is like female. Because jami mukassar fi hukme mufrad muannas. أما أنه لا يخلو من الحركة والسكون. Jism is not free from motion and سكون. فلأن كل جسم لا بد له من مكان ضرورة. Because every jism certainly needs a space. Okay? This is in the definition of jism. You remember we said كل متحيز. Jism needs a space. حينئذ, in that case, إما أن يكون لابثا في, either it remains and stays in the same space. We call it سكون. فهو الساكن. So this just has سكون and we call something which has سكون, we call it ساكن. أو منتقلا عن, or he is moving from that place to another place. وهو المتحرك. So either just remains in its own place or it's moving to a new place. So it is either sakin or mutaharrik. If it is remaining in the same place, it's sakin. If it's moving to the second place, it's mutaharrik. إذ لا واسطة بينهما بالضرورة. Because there is no middle situation between haraka and sukun. Between haraka and sukun, there is no middle situation. You know, just because it's a bit difficult, maybe I say a joke. So they say someone has just learned English, a little English. So came to England. And in the form, now this is not in the landing card, but the joke says this was there. So there were a few questions. One was, are you married or single? And he didn't remember what does it mean to marry. So he said, if I am married and I say single, it's a problem. If I am single and say I'm married, it's a problem. So what should I do? He put a little. So he said, I write a little. So if I am supposed to say married and I say a little, it's okay. If I'm supposed to say single, I say a little. So he wanted to find something between single and married, a little.
Yeah.
But this made it worse, because if he had said one of them, 50% was chance to be correct, but now there is no chance. Okay. So, between haraka and sukun, there is no a little. Okay? Either haraka or sukun. I'm sure at least you remember this joke. وَأَمَّا أَنَّهُمَا حَادِثَانِ. Why haraka and sukun are hadith? We said jism is not free from haraka and sukun. Haraka and sukun are hadith, and jism is also hadith. Why haraka and sukun are hadith? أما أنهما حادثان فَلَأَنَّهُمَا مَسْبُوقَانِ بِالْغَيْرِ. Because haraka and sukun are preceded by another thing. You remember we said al-hadithu masbughun bil-adam or bil-ghayr. I gave you example of being gas and liquid later, or being in one place and going to another place. لأنهما مسبوغان بالغير, because haraka and sukun are preceded by another thing. ولا شيء من القديم بمسبوغ بالغير. Qadim cannot be preceded by another thing. So haraka and sukun are not qadim. Maybe you say, why they are preceded by the other? That is the next paragraph. We don't take anything for granted. We explain for you everything. Okay, just you have to be patient. أما أنهما حادثان. Haraka and sukun are hadith, are created. Why? Because they are preceded by ghayr, by another thing. And qadim cannot be preceded by another thing. Qadim has always been there. There is no history of change, history of non-existence, history of another condition. لا شيء من الحركة والسكون بقديم. So حركة والسكون, none of them is eternal. So they are حادث فيكونان حادثان. إذ لا واسطة بين القديم والحادث. There is no middle position between حركة and سكون. There is no middle position between قديم and حدوث. Okay? So you cannot say it's a little قديم. Okay? Why haraka and sukun are preceded by another thing, by the other. This is the most difficult paragraph. Those who have heart attack can leave the class. Okay. Inshallah, it will be easy if you listen carefully. أما أنهما مسبوقان بالغير. Haraka and sukun are preceded by the other because of this. What is the definition of haraka? What is the definition of sukun? If you remind yourself of the definition which we had last page, then you would understand. لأن الحركة. What is haraka?
From one point to another.
You are in a new place. So it means that you were not here, you were in another place. It's very obvious. Haraka means you are in a new situation, in a new place. So it's preceded by being in another place. Someone has gone from this room to another room. So now he is preceded by being in this room. Okay? لأن الحركة عبارة عن الحصول الأول في المكان الثاني. If I want to examine someone whether he understood Baba Hadi Ash, this is one of the paragraphs that I can use to see whether this person understood Baba Hadi Ash, understands Arabic, is clever, everything need to be together to understand this. لأن الحركة, because what is haraka? What is motion? عبارة عن, consists in. عبارة عن means consists in. الحصول الأول, the first presence in the second place. الحصول الأول في المكان الثاني. Remember the example. Someone from this room has gone to the other room. What is haraka? Haraka is his situation when first he arrives in the second room. So he used to be in the first place, now he is in the second place for the first time. Al-Husul al-Awwal, the first presence, because if it is Al-Husul al-Thani fi al-Makan al-Thani, this is sukun. Because if he arrives there and stays there, it becomes al-husul al-sani fil makan al-sani.
What he goes
Second presence in the second place. No, first presence in the second place.
But what about the emotion? The
Yeah.
emotion.
That doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's haraka, isn't it?
Yes. But we have harakat tawassuti, harakat qatiyya. We don't want to talk about it. But anyway, you are moving from this room to the other room. So in the new situation, when you are there for the first time, this is haraka.
Exactly.
So it has to be second place, but first presence. Because if it is second presence, it means that he moved, then he stopped.
Yeah, indeed, yes, that's true.
Okay, then it becomes sukun.
Indeed, yes.
So, الحصول الأول في المكان الثاني. Yes.
Sorry, Sheikh, couldn't I as well say that when I move, actually my first step is already my first present?
Yeah. So that is your second place.
Yes,
When I say second place, it can be your first step.
yes.
Just we are trying to simplify, say next room. Otherwise, every step is a haraka. Every change, even every inch is a haraka. الحصول الأول, not حصول الأول. الحصول الأول. It's صفة موصوف, not مضاف ومضاف إليه. The first presence in the second place. This is preceded by what? By the first place. Zaruratan, necessarily. It's obvious. So harakat definitely comes always after something. Okay? It's preceded by a previous situation. What is sukun? السكون عبارة عن الحصول الثاني في المكان الأول. Being for the second time in the first place. Second presence in the first place. This is sukun. You have not gone anywhere. You are still in this same place. This is sukun. والسكون عبارة عن الحصول الثاني في المكان الأول. The second presence in the first place. So even this has a precedence. What is the precedence? Al-Husul al-Awwal. Yes? When he was there for the first time. فَيَكُونُ مَسْبُوغًا بِالْحُصُولِ الْأَوَّلِ بِالضَّرُورَةِ. Obviously. So alhamdulillah, it's clear.
Yes, yes, clear.
No casualty, no heart attack.
No way.
Yes. السكون عبارة عن الحصول الثاني في المكان الأول. Sukun consists in second presence, second being in the first place. So, sukun, because it is second presence, it's preceded by what? First presence in the same place. فيكون مسبوقا بالحصول الأول. It's preceded by first presence. Because when do you understand sukun? When your mind reflects on something being in the same place for 2 times. Otherwise you cannot make the concept of sukun. Sukun is a concept that we abstract when we consider the same thing in one place in 2 times. I say, for example, 5 minutes ago he was here, now it is still he's there. So we say this is sukun. So sukun is always preceded by a previous time and previous state in that place. Otherwise we cannot say it's sukun. So if something has no time, we don't say it has sukun. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we don't say he is sakin. It's wrong to say he is sakin. Because sukun and haraka are adamu malakeh. Okay? For something which has time and can move or stop, we say sukun harakat. If someone is outside time framework, then we don't use sukun. You remember I told you about being blind and being able to see. This is adamu malaka. We cannot say wall is blind or wall is basir, is able to see. Okay? Or wall is alim or jahil. None of them. Haraka and sukun are used for something which is in a time, in a space. Either he has gone from one place to another place, or he has stayed in the second time in the first place. If something has stayed in the second time in the first place, we say this is sakin. Okay? وَأَمَّا we had another claim. We said anything which is not free from hadith, he is himself hadith. If there is a subject, a substance that is subject to changeable things, then itself must be hadith. If something, for example, changes in color, changes in time, changes in, knowledge, changes in emotions, this cannot be qadim, because qadim has to be free from changes.
This is in potentiality and actuality, both. Yeah. The change is in potentiality and actuality.
Change always requires potentiality. If something is absolutely actual, has no change. Therefore, whatever is qadim, we say it's completely actual. Yes. Okay. Amma أن كل ما يخلو من الحوادث فهو حادث. Whatever is not free from hadith itself is hadith, because لأنه لو لم يكن حادثا لكان قديما. If it is not hadith, it has to be qadim. Now, let's tell you what is wrong. If qadim is subject to changeable conditions, حينئذ, if this is qadim, إما أن يكون معه في قدمه شيء من تلك الحوادث اللازمة له. Either in eternity it had these changeable things, or it didn't have. Both of them are wrong. إما أن يكون معه في قدمه شيء من تلك الحوادث اللازمة له. Either some of those changeable things, created things which are necessary for him, either they were there in eternity, or they didn't exist in eternity and they came later. أو لا يكون. إن كان الأول, if you say no, they existed with it in eternity, from azaliyah, these hawadis were there, then they are not then hawadis if they were there from azaliyah. Yeah, so then they are not hadith. أما فإن كان الأول لازم اجتماع القدم والحدوث معا في شيء واحد. If you say these haraka and sukun, for example, which are hadith, existed with qadim in eternity, so this means that hadith, which is haraka and sukun, at the same time that it is hadith, it is also qadim. How can something be hadith and exist in eternity? This is contradiction. Okay? In kana al-awwal means if they existed with it in eternity. لازم اجتماع القدم والحدوث. It would imply that being created and being eternal come together for the same thing. What is the same thing? Haraka, sukun, those hawadis. وهو محال. This is impossible. وإن كان الثاني, and if they are not with it in eternity, يلزم بطلان ما علم بالضرورة. If they were not there with it in eternity, then it requires to say something that we know for sure to be reality, to be wrong, to be false. What is that? امتناع انفكاك الحوادث عنه. Impossibility of being free from hawadis. Because you said these hawadis are always with it. Now you say they didn't exist in eternity. So this is contradiction. This is muhal. So, jism is subject to haraka and sukun. Haraka and sukun are hadis. Therefore, jism has to be also hadis. Okay? Jism cannot be qadim and then have haraka and sukun which are hadis. What about a'raz? We said this alam is either jism or araz. So we prove that jism is hadis. If we prove that a'raz are also hadis, then we can say that we have proved that alam is hadis. And if alam is hadis, then Allah is not mujab. Yes.
Sheikh, did you translate this? وهو امتناع انفكاك الحوادث عنه. Did you translate it in English?
Yes.
What did you say?
I can repeat. إن كان الثاني. If we take the second option and to say that in the eternity, okay, in the eternity they were not there. Okay?
What wasn't there?
The hawal.
You know, we said,
Haraka and sukun.
the question was this. Why something which is subject to hudus, for example, sukun and haraka, why it has to be hadis? What is wrong if someone says, we have jism, and jism is qadim, but there are two conditions for jism, like sukun and haraka, which are hadis. If someone says, what is wrong with this? Why you cannot have an eternal object which has changeable also conditions? What is wrong with that? We say, is this qadim? If you say it's not hadis, you say it's qadim. You know, burhan khulf. We say, is this qadim in its eternity with these two things or not? If in its eternity it's not with these things, so it's very good. So then why this came to it? If in eternity it had these two things, so why you say these two things are hadis?
Yes.
How can two hadis be with it from eternity? Okay, so we have here problem with this assumption that something qadim can have changeable qualities, changeable conditions. We believe that whatever admits hadith, whatever admits changeable things, itself must be hadith. Qadim has to be always the same. Something which is qadim has to be the same, because any change cannot be eternal.
Because it was either this
Yes.
or preceding something.
Yes.
I think when you use these arguments to argue about Jesus, it's impossible that God had a son called Jesus who came to the world, the Trinity. It's a completely goes against logic totally, doesn't it? And against all those things.
We talk about unity later. Unity, we will talk about it later. Of course, we talked about it a little bit before,
Yes.
but any quality, like giving birth, for example, or being born, which is for changeable things, cannot be attributed to wajib al-wujud. Because wajib al-wujud is eternal, and something which is eternal is not subject to change. Change needs time, and time is for limited things, for finite things. Amma al-a'rad. What about a'rad? Why a'rad are hadith? Because a'rads are in need of their subjects, which is just here. We cannot have, as I said, color without a subject, without a physical object. You say, for example, softness, whiteness, hardness. Hardness of what? So there has to be a jism. So when we prove that jism is hadith, araz also has to be hadith. Otherwise, if araz is qadim and jism is hadith, it means that you had araz without jism. Is it clear? أما الأعراض فلأنها محتاجة في وجودها إلى الأجسام. أعراض cannot be qadim because they themselves need just in their existence. والمحتاج إلى المحدث. When something is in need of muhdath, then by priority it has to be muhdath. If A needs B and B is muhdath, so A is worse because it needs muhdath. So how can you say something which depends on muhdath is qadim? Okay? Al-muhtaju ila al-muhdath awla bil-huduth. It has to be hadith by priority. أما بيان الدعوة الثانية. The second claim. You remember we said we have two claims. The second claim. فهو أن المحدث. The second claim was that if alam is muhdath, God has to be qadir.
Yeah.
Why? أن المحدث لما اتصف ماهيته بالعدم تارة وبالوجود أخرى كان ممكنا. Muhdath is always contingent. Why? Because muhdath is something that didn't exist and then came into existence. So is this wajib al-wujud or mumkin al-wujud? Mumkin al-wujud. Muhdath is always mumkin al-wujud. Kana mumkina. Every mumkin we proved before needs mu'athir. Because mumkin has equal relation to existence and non-existence. So it needs an external factor to make one of these two necessary for it. You remember in the first chapter we talked about this. فَيَبْتَغِرُ إِلَى الْمُؤَثِّرِ. So it is mumkin, therefore it needs originator, it needs a cause. Now, the question is the mu'athir, the creator of this alam, mukhtar or mujab? We said this alam is muhdath. The creator is qadim. So cannot be mujab. Because the creator was there, alam was not there. Because alam has a history of non-existence. Okay? So, of course, with some kind of simplification, we can say, like, there was a time that this alam didn't exist. Just I'm simplifying. I don't say really there was a time, because there was no time. But it means that there is a time, limit for this alam. You can say it in this way. Don't say there was a time that this alam didn't exist, but say this alam has a time limit. 1 million year, 1 billion year, whatever it is, there is a time limit for this alam. But Qadim is eternal. So, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was mujab, this alam must be also Qadim, not with a time limit. Okay? فَإِنْ كَانَ مُخْتَارًا, if that mu'athir is mukhtar, you accept that it is mukhtar, فَهُوَ الْمَطْلُوب. This is what we wanted. And كَانَ mujaban. But if you say no, you insist that this mu'athir was mujab, لَمْ يَتَخَلَّفْ أَثَرُهُ عَنْهُ. If it was mujab, its effect cannot rebel, cannot say, I don't want to be there. It has to accompany it. لم يتخلف. Cannot, say, I don't want to accompany you. فَيَلْزَمُ قِدَمُ أَثَرِهِ. So its effect also must be eternal. If the cause is qadim and mujab, so the effect must be also qadim. It's very clear. لَكِنْ ثَبَتَ حُدُوثُهُ. But in the first claim we prove that this alam is hadith. فَيَلْزَمُ حُدُوثُ مُؤَثِّرِهِ لِلتَّلَازُمِ. So then the mu'athir has to be hadith if it was mujab. فَكِلَ الْأَمْرَيْنِ مُحَالٍ. So neither we can say this alam is qadim, nor we can say the mu'assir of alam is hadith. So we have to say mu'assir is qadim, alam is hadith, so mu'assir is not mujab. Yes? Something that you understood in the beginning, but we expanded, and now we come to the same conclusion. Sometimes people say, no, why you confuse people? But this is to explain it because people sometimes have some questions, So we have to explain in case someone has a shubha, a paradox in his mind, a question in mind, we explain everything. Otherwise, for some people, maybe just what we said last week was enough. Sometimes you say an argument for existence of God in 5 minutes, sometimes you explain it in 1 hour. Depends what is in the mind of that person. First try with brief explanation, but if that person has question, then expand it. Don't expand first. Let the person ask further questions. If he has further questions, then you expand. Yes?
If alam is hadith, is originated,
Yes.
and haraka is originated because that belongs to the property of originated things,
Yeah.
then if you're saying, as you said before in simple language, that there was a time that alam was not there, then it was there. Does that mean that in Allah, there was a haraka or a change?
No. No, there is no change in Allah.
But you are saying that it was there and it wasn't, that there is haraka in the hadith.
Yeah, this is very, very good question. And one of the most difficult questions is to explain how God is not changeable, but we have a changeable world. Okay? So, the answer briefly is this. God has not created the world and then kept changing it. If you were thinking that God created the world and then God keeps changing it, then God himself is doing things gradually. The whole material world, with whatever time and space that it occupies, is created by God at once. For us, this world is gradual and is unfolding. But for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has created only once. Ma amruna illa wahida. Allah has created only one thing and once. But when you look at inside what is created, then you see
Changes.
it's like, for example, just for the sake of example, in my mind I can think of 100-floor building. Just now, imagine 100-floor building. How much time it took me to create this? Instantly. But how long it takes you to go from first floor to the second floor, especially if the lift is not working? It takes you 1 hour to go from first floor to 100th floor.
Not yet have uptime.
But I imagined it once.
Yes. Yes.
So something which is inside then can go gradually. But the one that created this, created at once. In my mind, I can think of 12 months at the same time. I imagine, for example, one calendar year. But then days have to come one after the other. A spring cannot come after summer. Summer cannot come after. Everything has the order. So there are two relations. The relation between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and everything in this world is the same. But the relation between the things which are inside this world has graduality. Yes.
But Allah talks in the Quran about having created the 7 heavens and the earth,
Yes.
and He talks about them in the number of days, whatever. I mean, obviously not.
This is for us.
Yes, it is for us, but He still talks
But for him,
about,
ma amruna illa wahida.
no, but He still talks about a systematic, step-by-step process.
Yeah, that's for us.
Okay. So if you're saying, the examples you gave of imagining it in your mind, it's always been there. So you could say it has always been there. It was there,
What?
the world. So the argument is that you're saying
Always,
it's not
always you mean outside this world
No,
or inside this world? You mean inside this world? This world has not always been inside itself. This world has a time limit.
no, but not in the real sense of existence outside. I'm talking about that Allah, it doesn't have harakat, it doesn't have motion. It has been there. Is it potentially been there?
Allah?
The world.
This world has a time limit. Okay? So, this world cannot be said that existed eternally. For example, either 1 million year or 1 billion year or 1 trillion year, this is the life of this world and still it's continuing. As far as this world is concerned. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not affected by the passage of time. Allah is not like a person who created something and is now watching it. Or someone who is, for example, playing with something. Everything which is created, no matter how much it is expanded in space and time, they are all present for God at once.
But were they present always? Was
For
there an
God, yes, but not for themselves. So which language you are using?
Yeah.
The language of someone who is inside this world,
No.
or the language of Allah subhanahu wa
No,
ta'ala?
the language of Allah.
For Allah,
Were they-
yes.
present.
For Allah, past, present, future are the same. East, west are the same.
So can we then use the wording to say it was always with Allah in the language of Allah?
In the language of Allah, actually it's more precise to say Allah was there and nothing was there and still nothing is there. You know, we say Kan Allahu walam yakun ma'ahu shay wal'an kama kan. Still there is nothing with him. Because this world is not in a position to be with Allah.
No, but not in the sense of with him. What I'm saying is, the
You know, this world, just this is a kind of maybe metaphoric, but this world is trying hard to grasp Allah, but Allah is too transcendent to have any attachment to this world.
Indeed,
You know, like a child that, you know, takes the dress of the mother, but mother doesn't need the child. You understand? We are needy. For us to make even sense, we have to refer to God. Without reference to God, we even have no meaning. We are absent, let alone existing. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't need us at all.
No. Yes.
Well, the language is definitely a barrier, but so obviously my language is very basic. What I'm trying to say is that with Allah,
Yes.
there is no haraka, no motion, no change.
Yes.
With Allah, the creation is, you know, not in the sense of the world as an existent, but the creation is there. So then you can argue as,
What do you mean with Allah?
well, I don't know what the exact
In
terminology
his level,
is.
no. In his level, there is nothing else.
Therefore, you have to admit that if it isn't Qadim, it came. It was a time when it wasn't there.
Ah.
At
But it's
an
better,
instant.
it's better not to say there was a time that this was not there. It's better to say this came with a time. Because time started with this alam. Before this alam, there was no time. Because time needs an object which is changing. Okay, I think we stop, then we can carry with questions. Then just we stop the recording. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.